Hi, this is Scott. Welcome to the Tall Woodworker. In this video, I'm going to make some wood and resin coasters. Stick around. So a couple videos back, I made a wood and resin end table that turned out absolutely phenomenal. Love the way that it looks. And if you watched that video, you might have seen me cut these pieces away. I was originally going to just toss these, and I thought, well, if you lay them out the right way and pour some resin in there, that could make an interesting set of coasters. And as I'm looking at the thickness of these boards, I could actually probably make 2 sets of coasters out of these. So that's what I'm going to be doing. So in this video, I'm going to start by making a mold out of a sheet of HDPE plastic that I picked up at my local Granger. Wasn't that expensive, probably about $20 for a sheet of 12-inch by 24-inch HDPE, and it's about 1/2 inch in thickness. And this is more than enough to make a mold for coasters. I went into SketchUp and created a, sketch on what it is that I'm trying to accomplish here, and it seems fairly simple and straightforward. I'm not putting any fasteners on this, no sealant or anything like that. When in use, I will apply a bead of silicone around the corners, but nothing that's going to be permanent. I'm going to get started with doing the mold for this project and cutting down this sheet of HDPE. My plans include a cut list that will show you the exact sizes I made these pieces out of. I tried to make this as simple as possible and use the material efficiently. So we've got our base piece, side pieces, and then these will end up being the caps. The way that I'm going to encapsulate all of this is by putting in a dado into the 4 side pieces to contain the base piece. And then on the caps, we're going to put dados running vertically so that the side pieces will fit into the end caps. I'm going to get the dado stack put into the saw and we'll start cutting some dados. There are some pretty good tutorials out there on getting a perfect fit for your dados. I highly recommend watching Stumpy Nub's video on dado sizing. I did it that way and got these right on the first test cut. We got our dados cut into both the sides and the end caps. The test fit for this is bang on. In fact, I actually do wish I put in slightly more space, but I'm going to look at this as a positive. Shouldn't have to worry about leaks. And nothing a little percussive persuasion can't handle. And we did run into a problem. Somehow I got my measurements wrong, and I see exactly why. I was supposed to cut these in so that there was a 1/2 inch down below and to each side. Instead, I did 1/4 inch. So I'm going to have to recut these dados. Not really too big of a deal. This was more my mistake. I didn't read my own documentation. Documentation is correct. And the good news is that since I'm cutting it inward, it'll still seal up properly. I don't actually need it to seal on this outside, and that'll help make it easier to take on and off. So I'm going to go ahead and cut these right now. I'll be right back. Yeah, those fit a lot better. Unfortunately, I think this side I cut a little too much, but my intentions are to put beads of silicone around there anyway. I got those cut up into smaller pieces, and now I should be able to lay these in here very nicely and get the effect that I'm going for. So that would be 1 coaster set, and then this one will be the 2nd set. So I need to start by sealing everything up, and then we can start measuring out some resins. After applying a bead of silicone on all edges, I use a popsicle stick to scoop out any extra. The round end of the stick also helps press the silicone into the edges and creates a nice seal. I place the wood in and let it set up before moving on. So it's time for the resin pour. Now I know I messed this up during the river table. We're not going to make that same mistake this time. I'm keeping my eye on the camera, making sure that everything gets recorded. I'm using Moz Deep Pour Epoxy. I picked this up at my Rockler store. It is a 3-to-1 ratio by volume, so I've got mixing cups that allow for that. And I'm going to use the same black diamond cobalt blue that I did for the table, but this time I'm not going to mix in any white. I felt that didn't really do much for me. All right, time for the pour. It's so much nicer when you actually capture this on camera. So these blue coasters I had to finish up and give as gifts before I could record the rest. But remember, I have enough for 2 sets of coasters, so we can do the process all over again, this time with red resin. So the strange thing is, this powder looks red, but when you mix it up, it looked pink. So I added some gray powder to darken up the resin. It still looked pinkish when it was poured, but after it hardened, it looked like a nice, deep raspberry color. I really did like it. I let the coasters harden for about 3 days before demolding. Any sooner and the thinness of the project would have caused it to bend when removing from the mold. On both sets of coasters, I actually forgot to use mold release, but that's why I used HDPE plastic for the mold. Using a urethane mallet, I was able to knock off the ends and the sides. Then I used a chisel to separate it from the bottom. After that, I sent it to the planer until both sides were nice and flat. When sanding, I started with 60 grit. I did this because it scratches the resin very noticeably. This helps me identify any low spots. You can see on the ends they kind of suffered from a bit of planer snipe, so I took a little extra time to sand that part flat. Once both sides were flat to my liking, I sanded up to 320 grit. Between each grit, I wiped away any dust with acetone, and after the 180 and 240 grit, I raised the wood grain with water before sanding with the next grit. Now it's time to cut out the 4 coasters. I start by nibbling off each end, then use a stop block to cut all 4 coasters to the same width. After they are all cut, I rotate them, then cut them again to square. These were cut to just about 4 inches square. Next, I cut out some pieces of cork to around 3 3/4 inch to act as a bottom cushion against the table. Cork is wood, and it actually cuts very easily on the table saw. Back on the sander, I rounded off all 4 corners and sanded the newly cut edges. Time for some Odie's oil. Have I mentioned how much I love this finish? It wipes on easily, then after letting it soak in for a few minutes, you wipe off the extra. Simple as that. I was a bit afraid at first because it's kind of expensive, but a little really ends up going a long way. After the finish was dried, I masked off the ends of each coaster to only expose the area that will attach to the cork. This little bit of preparation saves from having to wipe away any adhesive that isn't covered by the cork. I spray a heavy amount on the cork since it's porous, then spray the bottoms of the coasters. I let the adhesive dry for about a minute, then I press them together. I can then remove the masking tape and admire my work. And there we have our set of wood and resin coasters. Now, this is the red set that you saw me make towards the end of the video. The blue set I actually gave away as a Father's Day gift. So I don't have those anymore, but you did see some photos of that before I started this outro. So this is a really fun project to do if you have some scrap wood from other projects. You can do all sorts of stuff with these molds in particular. And like I said, this worked like a champ, and I was able to use it twice. So I'm going to have plans for this available. Check out my Etsy store. It's going to be a pretty inexpensive plan if you want to purchase them from me, just so you can make your own molds. The HDPE sheet was really inexpensive from my local Granger, so definitely make one of these yourself. It's pretty straightforward. My only mistake was my mistake, the extra slot, the extra width in the dado. That's my mistake. That's not on the plans. That's stupidity. You do need to seal these for each use, but some silicone caulk works perfectly. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel and ring the bell so that you get notifications when I post new videos. Be sure to comment as well. Let me know what you like about this design. Let me know what you dislike and what you might change on it. And of course, let me know if there's anything you'd like me to give a try sometime in the future. Until next time, thank you for joining me in my shop.